Welcome to Fellowship Safaris, conversations about people of color and their journeys to subspecialist training in their countries of origin and around the world. Welcome to Fellowship Safaris. I'm your host, Njeri Karianjahi. I am really excited today. The next guest is somebody who I would like to believe has grown from a colleague to a friend. We have seen each other through our professional growths and journeys.
Thank you so much, Njeri. I'm quite excited to be here as well. My name is Rose Munge. I am a pediatrician, and now I'm also a pediatric hematologist and oncologist. So I deal with kids who have issues with the blood, diseases of the blood, and cancer in children.
Why hematology? Why oncology?
I think I have to start with why pediatrics. I remember, I was influenced by a book, to be honest. I read a book called Trufena, the Student Nurse, when I was about class 2 or class 3 of primary school. So I remember when we were walking to school with my dad, and I told him, one day I want to be a nurse. And my dad asked me why. I was like, because I want to work in a hospital and help kids. So then I was like, okay, if you're aiming for a hospital, why don't you aim for a doctor? And then I thought, okay, why not? And so from about class 3, I decided I'm going to be a pediatrician. So I went to med school to do pediatrics. For some reason, blood has always fascinated me. There's also another book, I think it was called The River and the Source. I am not too sure. But there's a lady in there who had a child with Down syndrome with leukemia. And that was the first time I'd heard of something like that. So it was fascinating then as a story, but now I could see it in real life. And back then, all the kids I saw with anything hematological, anything with cancer, it was a death sentence. After I completed my internship, I worked for a bit with a hematologist. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a success story in sickle cell, in leukemia. And so I started looking abroad, looking at research and seeing that the outcomes out there are so much better than ours. So that sort of drove me in that direction. There was the initial interest, but now I could see that there's hope. And that's what I wanted to pursue.
So exciting to hear how Trufena, the city nurse, was it Trufena the nurse?
Yeah, Trufena the student nurse, and then she became the city nurse. Yes. I don't know if she progressed from there, but that book really inspired me to do medicine.
That was a really good book. But class 3 is pretty early days to have already zoned in on, I want to do pediatrics, and your fascination with blood and blood disorders. Just to be able to lean into that a little bit. After you had finished your peds, how long did it take you to figure out like where you can be able to study hemato-oncology? How long did that process take you, and where did you settle on?
I finished my pediatrics in 2015. By then I was married. I had one child who was turning about 4 years old by then. The discussion with my husband had always been, at some point, I'm going to go back for a fellowship. So my choice of where to go was influenced a lot by my family. But then it had always been at the back of my mind. So every time there would be an application, the UK, the US, I would look at it. Canada, I think I looked at Australia. I looked at South Africa. I looked at Egypt. I talked to people who had been in these different places. But at the end of the day, I went to a program in Uganda, in Kampala. One was because of proximity, which for me was a big deal. The second thing was that it was a funded fellowship. And the third thing, I felt that if they are able to manage hematology and oncology cases from Uganda, and they are very similar population to ours with sort of the same healthcare system, then I should be able to translate that to here when I come back home.
You have mentioned a few things that I don't want to just drive right past. One, how you'd had this conversation with your husband that influenced proximity of where you were going. But then talk to us a little bit about what were some of the preparations that got into you preparing to go and do fellowship?
Because I had been talking about my fellowship for so long, when it came closer to the time, the fellowships that were available was not something I wanted to do. And so, I mean, we had a back and forth a little bit. He'd be like, "Oh, why don't you do something that's locally available?" I'm like, "But I won't really be happy. I won't be doing what I want to do. So I'd rather stay as a general pediatrician and wait and then get a chance to go and do what I wanted to do." So I remember there was once I'd come home after, I think, a pretty long shift, and I was so unhappy. Unhappy in the sense that long working hours, and I was positioned where I was doing a lot of maternity newborn work, which was not really feeding my soul. And the money was good, but I was so unhappy. And when he just looked at me one day, he's like, "You know what, just go and do your fellowship. If that's what will make you happy." Ever since he met me in medical school, he knew at some point this was going to happen. It was a little harder to break the news to my daughter. It took like 3, 4 conversations spaced out with tears everywhere about how I'm going to be coming every month and they'll be coming on holiday and we'll be doing video calls every single day. Talking about it helps. Having him there to support and say, "It's okay, we'll go and see mommy when you're on holiday." We talked on the video as frequently as possible. That really helped. We didn't want to destabilize everything. So if one person can go and the other person holds fort, we felt like that was the easier route to go.
A
Yeah.
big shout out to your husband and all partners out there to actually say, you know what, you guys, you go do your thing, I'll hold fort.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about what your funding structure looked like.
So the program I did is under Global Hope. So Global Hope it's like their global outreach program where they're trying to get as many people trained in hematology and oncology as possible across Africa. So they have a program in Uganda, they've got another one in Tanzania, Botswana, Malawi, and I think they're gearing up to expand to Rwanda and to South Africa. So what they do is they're giving training opportunities to doctors and nurses, pharmacists as well, and they're, I think, also helping with the laboratory support. What they do is they pay you a stipend for the duration of the time that you're in training. And then because it's a work as you're learning experience. So there's no school fees per se, but you have trainers, your lecturers, and people who are your mentors are also funded by them.
One of the big things that I've learned is that,
yeah,
as in these African fellowships out there for hemato-oncology, and that they're going out of their way to bring education opportunities closer to home so that more people can be able to plug in, more people can be able to get training.
Like all fellowship, it's pretty hands-on. It doesn't sit down classroom. In fact, they used to keep telling us, so what we're doing is we're throwing you in the deep waters and you got to figure out how to swim. And we'll be here and there'll be a life raft nearby, but you kind of need to learn how to swim. And then by the end of the program, you'll be comfortable in the deep waters. So get in, start with the pediatrics, and then we'll add on the oncology as you go along. As time went by, you got more and more autonomy and responsibility over the management of the patient. On top of the clinical work, so there was the ward rounds, the procedures that had to be done. On top of that, we had regularly scheduled training meetings where you pick a topic and you present on it, and you present the topic on the international forum. So people from Texas, people from Malawi would join in and you'd have a discussion. We had scheduled lectures, especially when we got into the second year where now the focus was more on the books. We had online material, we had access to the libraries. So you sort of would, at the end of your day, sort of go through some lectures or listen to a recording or read your textbooks. It was student driven. And even when you're discussing, it is you who picks the topic, and I'm struggling with this area, help me in this area. But it was very clinical, very patient oriented. And then when you have time, then you now read around it.
Were there any hurdles or any challenges during the course of your fellowship?
this is like work related, but also it seeps into the personal. Oncology and hematology is heavy. Like you're seeing kids with cancers, sometimes with cancers that you can do nothing about, or that you have treated and it has recurred. And so there's quite a heavy emotional toll. And one of the things that I'm really grateful to the program about is they schedule these things called reflective seminars, where every so often you'd come together and you talk about these issues and you're able to unload some of the burden. And so because it's so heavy emotionally, and because you can't help but get attached to the kids, and so when you have a bad diagnosis or when you lose a patient, you sort of feel like you've lost a part of yourself as well. So that seeped into your personal life. So you can, it's hard to completely separate the two, but they did give us lots of encouragement and tools to sort of be able to separate the two. So it's still work in progress, and you can never quite really separate yourself. Or sometimes you'd find yourself, you're at home, you're on leave, but you're thinking about your patient and how you left them, and you want to call and follow up. And sometimes that can become a little bit unhealthy, because now it seeps into everything. Because there was that time that it was taking a very big toll on my mental health. And so I had to learn how to step back a little bit. I had to learn how to ask for help.
For a lot of healthcare professionals, it all feels like one jumbled. Like you can't, like the way the way you started by saying it's personal, but it's also work. We
Yeah.
are in a society and in a continent where there's so much stigma around mental health,
Yeah.
around us being able to talk about how we are feeling and processing something that has happened. In the African context, how was, reflective seminars, how are they received?
I think in the beginning, when we were starting off, it was unfamiliar territory. So you feel like, how can I be sitting in a room with strangers and talking about my feelings, about, work and mental load and all that? But as time went on, because what I realized is I had to give it a proper chance and see if it would actually help. Because everyone who'd gone through the program before had said how helpful it was. So, you're like, okay, let me actually give it a proper chance. And once you did, towards the end, now you start relying on them, because you're like, I need to have a way to express this. And if I don't, it will become unhealthy. Towards the end of my first year, because everything was so heavy, the mental was starting to affect the physical. So, you're not sleeping well, you're getting insomnia,
Yeah.
there's weight gain. And because I am a comfort eater,
Mm-hmm.
I was eating junk food. I was not
Yeah.
watching what I was eating. I was working long, crazy hours, not sleeping, looking for a way out.
Yeah.
I started relying a little bit. When you get home and you want a drink, and then the next day you want a
Mm,
drink, and then the third day you want
mm,
a drink, there's a problem. You're like,
yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
bit much. So when I realized I was heading down that road, and then it's not helping me, I think my BPs went up a bit, and I was like,
Oh,
this is
wow.
not healthy.
Mm,
So now let's give it the full chance. Let's actually talk, use the reflective seminar. Then from there, now, if that's working, then start working out. Like, now start putting tools in place to help you cope. And now
mm.
remember to do them on a daily basis. And that's what, kept me going. Because even I'd
Oh,
come home
wow.
and her husband is like, what's going on with you? And I'm like, I don't even know how to explain. Because I'm also carrying mom guilt. So I'm carrying mine, and I'm sure he had his. He's trying to carry his and not dump on me. And so everyone is trying to help the other by not talking. And then it becomes this spiral of things. So that for me was extremely helpful. Having that reflective
Mm,
seminar is extremely helpful. It's a thing we need to accept. I
right.
think Africans they brush it off. Oh, those are white people problems. They're not. We're all
Yeah.
struggling with these things. We need to be able to
Right.
talk about them.
For me, one of the things that I found helpful, like in my toolkit, was something as simple as exercise.
I've always been a reader, but I found that I prefer physical books and reading to take off my mind off things, because reading actually calms me down, helps me relax. I realized that if I don't find an alternative way, then I will be in trouble. So I started doing audiobooks, and it was a game changer. Setting up a routine and having a routine really helps. So I know I wake up in the morning, I read a book, I do my meditation, I work out. Now I'm ready for the day. And if I could keep up with my runs, if I could work out, if I am making my bed, and they do seem like very small things, but they make me feel like I have some control, because I don't have control in many things. I can't tell you whether your kid will be cured or not. I can't tell you what we're doing with work. But at least I have a little bit of a sense of control, and that gives me enough, builds me up, and then I'm able now to also give on the other side.
Talk to me about how you are able to maintain connections in terms of your friendships.
So one of the things Kampala helped me discover is that I really value my connection. The circles I have, I really am grateful for them. So because of the distance, we did a lot of WhatsApps, we did a lot of videos. I am grateful that I had friends who got me and that I could lean on them whenever I needed. Maybe I should have tried harder to make some connections, but I felt like I did this a little bit late, and maybe it would have helped me better mentally if I had tried a bit more. I was a bit too reserved, and I was a bit too maybe scared to try new things, because now when I did that towards the end, I found that perhaps I wouldn't have felt so heavily laden if I had tried a little bit and made a few more connections on there. That's the only thing I regret. I should have tried a bit more to connect a bit more with people there. If anything, being away from home and being in Uganda and having time to myself and dealing with what I'm dealing helped me strengthen my faith. Well, I feel like there's just no way I can look at the kids I'm taking care of and think that it's in my hands. I feel like I am definitely not the one, running things. And sometimes you can get big-headed. You know how to do all these things. You can do all these diagnosis. You can do all these things, and then you can, lay out the best treatment plans, and things will go the way they will go. It helps me keep in perspective that just an awareness that we are not the authors of our own lives, and to some extent. So it helps me have strength, and it helps me be able to give my best to the patient and to give some hope. I got married right after internship, and then I became a mother immediately. I had dated my husband from second year of medical school. So it was nice to have time to remember who I was before all the titles.
Do you have any regrets?
So the regret was I didn't spend more time exploring. I was too focused on work, and maybe it would have been a more richer experience if I took a bit more time to have a bit more fun. But I don't regret the experience itself. The learning itself was great.
And do you have any words of wisdom?
What I also didn't know going in was how heavy it would be. I think it's nice that you're doing this, Njeri, because you sort of know the rest will be difficult. Everyone tells you med school is hard. Everyone tells you masters is hard. Fellowship it doesn't get that much information. And so you have to think about the effects of the fellowship on your relationships. If you're in a different country, there's that aspect of you're not home, and how important are your social connections to you. And you need to think about the things that ground you and what you need to do to have them. If that's what you want to do and that's what you're focused on, I say go for it. Reach out, talk to us, because we can't win that battle by ourselves. We need people. And the more people are there, the better the outcomes, the better the care.
Thank you so much for sharing about your experience, sharing about the things that have helped you, sharing a bit about your process with your family, which I think was really precious, as well as the plug for hematology.
I'm so glad you stayed tuned. Please get the word out and share it with at least 3 people. Make this episode like a chain letter. Share it, share it, share it. Come back for the next leg of our safari, where we'll be talking about...
If you're willing to do a fellowship, you need to ask yourself, what for? Like, why, what are you going to do different once you complete your fellowship? If you are willing to get another degree, another diploma, if you want to make more money after it, and that is your motivation, have it clear in your mind. If you're willing to go and learn, to come back to your country and to help others, or to move to that country and stay there and practice and help others, you have that clear in your mind, because if you don't have that clarity, you won't be able to navigate the challenges that...
It takes a village to make this podcast. Strategic and creative direction was done by Njeri Karianjahi and Melissa Mbogwa. The producer of the show is Melissa Mbogwa. Tevin Sudi is the sound engineer, with thanks to AQ Studios. The graphic design was done by Benjamin Boyer, and the original music was done by husband extraordinaire Mwakavi Moweo. This is an Africa Podfest production.